this week's Campfire Stories with Carly. This week we are getting a little spooky, so if that's not your thing, go ahead and skip this story. But I find it kind of amusing, actually. So this one is about ghosts. And this story is from Mysteries and Miracles of New Mexico, a guidebook to the genuinely bizarre in the land of enchantment by Jack Cutts. So in New Mexico, any night can be Halloween. This enchanted land has produced enough supernatural phenomenon to fill a dozen books. It has had more haunted houses than New England, more witches than Salem, and more ghosts than the Georgian swamps. Often, the devil himself seems to have felt very much at home here. It is impossible to cover all of the ghostly incidents that have occurred in New Mexico. Obviously, not all of these tales can be substantiated, but it is worth remembering that the New Mexicans who originated them swore that the stories were true. While most of the stories are hair-raising, others, like the haunted rectory of Santa Cruz, are merely charming. And that is the one that we are about to read. In 1798, a fine, sturdy church and convent were built in the fledgling settlement of La Villa Real de Santa Cruz, across the Rio Grande from Española, which, by the way, is pretty dang close to Los Luceros historic site, where this is being filmed. The rectory, which accompanied the church, was also a fairly impressive structure. 2 stories with several bedrooms, a large kitchen, dining hall, and long corridors leading to the storage room and closets. A single narrow stairway led to the 2nd floor, where a comfortable drawing room had been furnished to accommodate weary travelers who stopped overnight in Santa Cruz. In 1892, as the rectory neared its centennial anniversary, the pastor, Padre Halteman, was called to Santa Fe by the bishop. Before leaving, Father Halteman placed his housekeeper in charge. The true name of the housekeeper is unknown, but some have referred to her as Doña Teresa, a name as good as any at this point. She had a 9-year-old daughter, Dulitas, living with her in one of the rectory's many rooms. Down the hall, Santa Cruz's new school teacher, Doña Elenita, had recently taken up a temporary residence. Both Doña Teresa and Doña Elenita had been warned by the townspeople that the rectory had an odd and disturbing reputation. One of the early pastors, Fray Francisco, had died. His successor, Fray Juan, had also died suddenly in a rather bizarre accident. He slipped and fell under the wheels of New Mexico's first trains. After the death of the 2nd priest, strange things began to happen in the rectory. Lights were seen passing by the upper windows at night, and sometimes the back door was wide open the next morning. The parish sexton and gardener, old Gregorio, wouldn't go near the place after dark. Doña Teresa was not a woman who could be easily intimidated. She was a hard-working woman doing the best she could to raise her daughter. In short, she had no time for ghosts. On that evening in 1892, with Padre Halteman off to Santa Fe, Doña Teresa bid the school teacher good night and blew out the candles after tucking little Dulitas into bed. She herself was just dozing off when she heard footsteps on the staircase and heard the drawing room door open and close. She lay quietly in the darkness, listening intently. Although the floorboards creaked occasionally above her head, she felt no sense of fear and soon fell asleep. In the morning, she spoke to Doña Elenita about what she had heard. "It may have just been a dream," she said, but Elenita shook her head. She too had heard the same sounds. Being practical rather than frightened, they checked the rectory doors and found them all still securely locked. No one could have come in during the night. That evening, Doña Elenita joined Doña Teresa and Dulitas in their room. The 3 waited quietly in the candlelight. Soon the footsteps ascended the stairs just as before. The The drawing room door opened and closed, and the floorboards began to creak above their heads. This time, they listened even more intently and were able to discern some details that they had missed before. It seemed obvious now that the two figures had climbed the stairs, not just one, and that creaking sound seems to be moving in some sort of irregular pattern, as if persons were circling at frequent intervals. Most curious of all, each time the footsteps halted, a soft click-clacking noise followed a few seconds later. Click-clack, click-clack. Teresa and Elenita looked at one another in perplexity. They couldn't imagine what the strange noises could be. During the remaining days of Father Halteman's absence, the ghostly ritual repeated itself nightly. Although Doña Teresa and Doña Elenita felt no fear about the eerie events, they still could not summon the courage to go upstairs and open the drawing room door. When Father Halteman returned, they told him about the odd experience, describing the footsteps, the opening and the closing of the door, the almost rhythmic pattern of the circling figures. Father Halteman furrowed his brow and nervously fingered his crucifix. He said he had heard these stories before from others who had stayed overnight in the rectory while he was gone. He could offer no explanation. Continuing their story, the woman tried to describe the peculiar click-clacking noise they had heard. It was then that Father Halteman's eyes opened wide. "So that's what this is all about," he exclaimed. "That's why they keep coming back." He urged the woman to come with him to the drawing room. Father Halteman fumbled with his large ring of keys and finally managed to open the long locked door. He walked across the room, past the dusty chairs and sofas. "This old parlor has provided rest and comfort for many a traveler," he said as he brushed a cobweb from his face. "But as you know, we don't get many visitors in Santa Cruz anymore. This room is no longer maintained." He pointed to an object in the center of the floor. "That was always the parlor's principal attraction, the billiard table. I don't approve of billiards myself. I consider it a frivolous game." He ushered the woman back through the doorway, closed and relocked the door. There was a tone of indignation in his voice when he said, "It appears, however, that Fray Francisco enjoyed the game immensely. Ah, the nerve of those two. Every time I leave town, they sneak back in here to shoot pool." So that's the end of the story. It turns out that these ghosts just wanted to play pool. They weren't out to harm anybody. They weren't particularly spooky, or trying to scare the people in there. They were just trying to play some pool. So I hope you enjoyed that story as much as I did. Thank you so much for tuning in.